Welcome to the Chasing Spirituality podcast. I'm your host, Megan, and I'm so excited that you're joining me today. Each episode is full of heartfelt and expansive content that will really help you expand your consciousness and grow as a person. I created this podcast because I wanted to share my own personal experiences on my spiritual journey, but I also wanted to meet others and have them share what they've been through and how they've gotten to where they are today. If you haven't done so already, it would really mean a lot to me if you could rate and review the podcast. This really helps the podcast grow and reach more people, but it also allows me to get more guests on the show. Now on to today's topic. Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of Chasing Spirituality. I am your host Megan, and as always, I'm super excited that you're here. Today we're going to be talking about intuition. We're going to be talking about how you can discern between intuition and fear. I feel like this is a really good topic because that's a question that I get all the time, is how do I know if this is intuition, if this is my guides or my higher self, or if this is just fear, if this is anxiety. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that, and also how you can learn to really develop your relationship with your intuition, with your higher self and guides, and how you can learn to trust that. I found that some of the most popular episodes on this podcast are the ones that I do talk about intuition development. So I always try to sprinkle those throughout the podcast as much as possible. And I felt called today to talk about fear and intuition and how you can really strengthen that relationship that you have with your intuition. But before we get further into the episode, I want to talk about a little bit of things that are going on this month. So in the Chasing Spirituality community, we always do 3 live calls, and this month our live calls are the channeled messages that usually happen at the beginning of the month, and I just tune into the energy of what I'm feeling and allow Spirit to speak through me and share insightful messages that they feel like everybody needs to hear. They feel like are going to be helpful in some way. So if you want to kind of get an example of what one of those calls sounds like, the last episode that aired was our live call from September. So that's kind of an example of what sometimes these calls sound like. There's always questions at the end, and we tune in a little bit more depending on what comes up for people and what questions they have, but that gives you an idea of what the body of the message, one of the messages can sound like. The other call that we're going to be doing this month is going to be our clairaudience practice circle. So we've started doing a practice circle every month where we're going to focus specifically on a clair. Last month we did clairvoyance. This month we're doing clairaudience. So if clairaudience is a gift that you use and you're wanting to develop it more, this call is definitely going to be beneficial for you. It's really laid back, and we just practice. We do certain techniques and skills and exercises that I have found really helpful along my own intuitive journey, my own intuitive practice. And then the last call that we have scheduled for October is another call that we do every month where we just get together and we practice using all of our intuitive gifts, all of our psychic senses. This is just our basic intuitive practice circle. I usually provide a picture or something that can really help you anchor in your gifts, and it really just gives you an opportunity to see how your psychic abilities really work. Because like I've said in this podcast before, my intuition is completely different from your intuition, and your intuition is different from everyone else's. We all have a unique language that we work with and that we strengthen and develop along our journey. This is your unique language that you use to communicate with energy, that you use to communicate with spirit and with the unseen world around you. And I have found that along my own intuitive journey, validation has been one of the most important keys to developing that. when we receive validation in a practice setting, it really allows us to trust ourselves, which is so important. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But it's so important to learn to trust the information that's coming through you. So in these practice circles, when you can actually see the way that your intuition works, the way that your psychic senses show up for you, and then receive validation for that. See that you actually can do this. You're actually getting things right. You're getting information that there's no way you would know these things. That really, really helps you progress because it really helps you build that trust with spirit and with yourself. Another thing about these practice circles that is super important is it helps you understand how your intuition works. Like I said, your intuition is different from my intuition, and that's different from everyone else's intuition. So while we can sometimes have the same gifts, we can use clairvoyance, use clairaudience, use clairsentience. While we can tap in and use these gifts, only you will be able to discern and figure out how they show up for you. And using these in a practice setting can give you an idea of how that looks, how that feels, how that sounds, how that works for you. And the more that you practice, the more that you give yourself the space to use your gifts and practice these gifts in a way that allows you to feel safe and comfortable and push yourself and test the limits, it just really helps everything connect and helps everything come full circle so that you can continue to progress on your own spiritual path. Another thing that we're going to be working on in the community this month is working on getting our goals and what we're wanting to manifest or bring into our lives. We're really going to work on getting really clear on that, and we're going to work on it's a tool that I like to use, and I usually share this with my online community as well as my in-person community, where we're going to build a calendar. We're going to set up a calendar where we can really map out the goals and really map out the achievements and the manifestations that we're wanting to bring into our life over the next year. So if you are part of the community, I encourage you to go ahead and get a planner or get a calendar or a journal or something like that that you can use. I recommend a planner that is also a calendar, because we're going to map out certain goals and certain deadlines within that calendar. So you can look forward to that little workshop as well, in addition to the normal calls that we have. So look forward to that. If you're not already a community member, you can find out more about joining on my website, chasingspirituality.com. Visit the community tab and it tells you more information and what you need to do to join us. But we would be happy to have you join our community and see you in our practice circles. So let's move forward into today's episode. Today, like I said, we're going to be talking about fear versus intuition and really learning to trust yourself and finding your own truth and your own intuition and how that works. So intuition is a relationship. The relationship that you have with your intuition is solely based on the relationship that you have with yourself. A lot of my episodes are intuition development episodes, but a lot of them are also episodes on personal development, personal growth, and how you can heal and become the best version of yourself. The reason for that is because these two things are connected. If you're really wanting to strengthen the relationship that you have with your spirit guides, with your higher self, with spirit in general, or whatever higher power you believe in, you first have to strengthen the relationship that you have with yourself. Just like any relationship, trust is a foundation. And if you do not trust yourself, then it's going to be really hard for you to trust what is intuition, what is signs and guidance from your higher self, from your spirit guides, from your spiritual team, and what is fear. So talking about fear versus intuition and how you can discern the two, the first thing that you have to work on is learning to trust yourself, learning to trust the messages when they do come through, learning to trust Spirit when Spirit does communicate with you. Because Spirit communicates to us in a variety of ways. Spirit communicates to us through our clairs, through clear sight, through hearing, through feeling. Some of these things, they're not tangible. When Spirit communicates with you, it's not always going to be obvious. It's not always going to be super vivid or in your face or loud or something that you can prove. Now, like I mentioned earlier, doing practice circles so that you can receive validation from the people you're practicing with, this can definitely help build that trust because you're able to be validated for what it is that your intuition is telling you or showing you. But if you don't trust yourself, if you don't trust that you are intuitive, then it's going to be really hard for you to trust anything that comes through to you. And I find that this is one of the biggest hurdles that my students have. Many of my students struggle with trusting what they're receiving, trusting the information as it comes through. So you have to ask yourself, what about this am I not trusting? Is it because I don't trust myself? Is it because I don't believe that I can really do this? Is it because I don't believe that Spirit is communicating with me, or that Spirit is showing me this sign, or Spirit is communicating with me in this way? And if those are if those are the types of things that are coming up for you, then I would say journal about those things. Journal about why you feel like you can't trust yourself. Why do you feel like you can't receive this information? Why do you feel like Spirit is not communicating with you? Because Spirit is always, always, always sending us signs and messages. A lot of times they're just subtle. Once you become aware of those signs, and assuming that you are listening to this episode, I believe that you are aware of some of these signs. Maybe not all of them, and that comes with more practice, that comes with more time. The more practice that you do, the more aware of the messages you will be. However, you have to first trust when those signs do come through. Because even if you're aware of them, you could still doubt yourself, second guess yourself, worry that you're wrong, worry that it's not real, worry that it's fear, worry that the messages are coming from your anxiety or from your imagination. But I want to challenge you to, for a moment, just pretend that it's not fear. Okay? Even if you don't share it with anyone, even if you don't pass along the message, just pretend that it's real. Give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Give your spirit guides, give your higher self the benefit of the doubt that this information is real. These signs, these messages, these symbols are coming through to you. You may not know what they mean, especially if it is symbolic, and Spirit does communicate with us in metaphors and with symbols. You don't always have to know what the message means. You don't always have to know what you're supposed to do with the message. Sometimes you never know. Sometimes that information comes later. But just like any relationship, you have to work at it. You have to build. If you have a relationship with anyone, it develops over time. The more that you get to know that person, the more that you learn that person, the more that you communicate with that person, the more that you trust that person, the stronger the relationship becomes. And it's the same thing with your intuition. It's the same thing with your relationship with your higher self, with your spirit guides, with your spirit team. It has to build over time. And the only way to do that is to get to know yourself, to get to know how your intuition works, how your intuition operates, and also learning to trust the messages when they come in. And I know you're probably saying, Megan, that is way easier said than done. I can't just snap my fingers and trust myself. Otherwise, I wouldn't be listening to this episode. And I promise I get it, because I have been exactly where you are. I have been in those situations where I get a message or I see something or I feel something or I hear something, and I sit there and I wonder, was this a real message? Was this a message from my higher self or from my spirit guides? Or if this was a true message, who was it from? Who, what, where, why? You have all these questions. And that's when the fear and that's when the doubt comes in. So a way that you can really discern whether it is fear or whether it is intuition is ask yourself, what were you doing? What were you thinking? What were you feeling when the message came through? When the intuitive knowing, the intuitive sight, the symbol, the feeling, whatever it was, whenever it came to you, what were you doing? What were you feeling? What were you thinking about? What was happening? If you were not already in a fear-based state when that message came through, then it's intuition. Intuition will never feel like fear when it comes through. It will never scare you. It will never sound dark. It will never sound scary. It will never promote fear. Now, if the message is something that frightens you after the fact, maybe you get an intuitive message to leave your job. And when you get that message, you're not doing anything. You're not having a bad day at work. You're not thinking about work. You get this intuitive feeling that you need to leave your job to start your own business. You might feel scared after that message comes through. That's normal. Of course, you're going to feel anxious to leave your job if it's not something that you've already been preparing for, planning for, or thinking about. But what were you feeling when the message came through to you? Were you sitting there stressing about work and thinking about how you might get fired because you made a mistake? Or were you angry because of the way that you were treated? You see the difference there? Like, if it just pops up out of nowhere, or there's something that's not fear-based that triggers that message to come through, then trust that it's intuition. Trust that it is your spirit team and your higher self communicating directly to you, guiding you, giving you that nudge that you need to start looking at leaving your job, to start looking at what that would look like for you, to start thinking about how you could prepare for that. And it's okay if you feel anxiety and fear afterwards. Intuition's not going to start with fear. So that's the first thing that you can do to discern whether this is anxiety or fear, or whether this is truly intuition. Intuition doesn't feel frightening when it originally comes to you. The next thing I want to challenge you is, when these messages come through, journal about them. Journal everything that you can remember. What were you doing? What were you thinking? What were you feeling? How did the information come to you? Was it through a certain Claire? Did you see it, feel it, know it? And then from there, if you still are having a hard time trusting, which it's okay, ask for more validation. Ask for more signs. Acknowledge the message. Don't just discredit the message. Don't push it away and say, oh, that was just my fear. Or I feel that way because I haven't been happy at work. Well, just because you're not happy at work doesn't mean that your guides aren't supporting you in that. They may tell you, yeah, you're not happy at work, so maybe it's time to find something different. And I'm just using work as an example, but obviously you can apply this to any message that comes through to you, whether it's about a relationship or whether it's about a class that you're wanting to take or anything. It's up to you to start to question it and to start to build what that message is. Messages are very subtle, but messages are also puzzle pieces. A lot of times we don't get the entire message all at once, especially in the beginning of our intuitive development journey, because it's hard for us to listen. It's hard for us to trust. It's hard for us to hear the full message. So Spirit's going to communicate with you however they can get the message through, whether that's showing you this or making you feel this or telling you that. They're just going to drop these little breadcrumbs for you. So when the message comes through, journal about it. Journal everything that you can remember, everything that you can recite, everything that you're feeling and going through, and then go back to your guides, go back to your higher self and say, hey, I received this message and I want to trust this message. I want to believe this message. I want to believe in myself, and I want to believe in my intuition and in my ability to connect. So can you please send me more? Can you send me more breadcrumbs? Can you give me more information? Can you direct me a little bit more? And then from there, continue the process. The more information that you get, the more signs that you receive, the more things that you hear and witness, journal about it. Ask questions. Spirit does, like I said, sends messages that don't make sense, messages that are very quick, because they want to get a point across. They just want to get as much information to us as possible. And depending on how our vibrational state is that day, we may not be in a capacity to receive a lot of intuition and intuitive downloads. So question, ask. And if you're not sure, question and ask. I've heard people say, please, please, guides, send me a sign of your sign. And I know we joke and we kid, but when you're learning your intuition, when you're learning to trust yourself, when you're learning this process and how your intuition works, it's okay to ask for a sign of your sign. That's how you grow. That's how you begin to learn to trust yourself more. That's how you begin to pay more attention to the signs that are coming to you. Because if you're just knocking them away, discrediting them, saying that it must have been your imagination or it wasn't truly a message from your guides, then you're not really receiving it. You're not allowing yourself to truly receive the message. So instead of disregarding the message, I want you to just trust it. Just trust that it's real. Trust that it's really happening to you. I talk about this a lot in these intuitive development episodes, and it's because that is the key. That is the number one thing that promotes you and pushes you along this journey, is trusting yourself. You don't have to know what the sign means. You don't have to take action on it. You don't have to know what the next step looks like. You just have to acknowledge that you received it. You have to acknowledge that you are being communicated with by a higher power, by your higher self, by whatever it is that you believe in. That's all you have to do. And that's the hardest part. So again, like I mentioned, working on yourself, working on trusting yourself and believing in yourself, working on your confidence, that is super important. All of these pieces are connected. All of these pieces matter. It's just like a relationship with anyone else. If you're anything like the average person, you don't just meet someone and automatically trust them. You don't meet someone and know what their intentions are, know who they are, know things about them. It takes time, it takes work, it takes effort. And it's the same thing with your spirit guides. It's the same thing with your intuition. You have to develop that relationship. You have to get to know yourself. You have to get to know your intuition. You have to get to know your guides. And the only way to do that is to practice using those gifts, to practice listening, to practice receiving. Receiving is so important. Even when we do receive, I notice that we tend to want to label everything. We want to know exactly what it means and where it came from and what we're supposed to do with that information. Just trust that that will come to you. The next step will come to you. The next phase will come to you. The next puzzle piece will come to you. You can always ask for it. But you have to acknowledge what's already been there first. You have to acknowledge what you've received first. You can't put a puzzle together without connecting all of the pieces. So what pieces are you receiving? Are you acknowledging those pieces? Validate those pieces for yourself. If you have an opportunity to work with others, whether it is in a practice circle or with friends or another community, that will amplify that even more. That will progress you even more because you can actually receive validation in the moment. It's really hard for us to receive validation when it's just us because we have to wait. We have to be patient. We have to wait for the validation to manifest in our reality. We have to wait for things to unfold. And if you're having a really hard time trusting your intuition and following their guidance, it's hard to always see that proof. It's hard to always see the validation when those things do manifest and when they do come up, especially if you're not following the guidance. So I want to encourage you to follow the guidance. Follow the breadcrumbs. See where it takes you. See where it leads you. And ask for a sign of your sign if you need it. Our intuition it's a muscle. It's just like anything else that we have to practice, that we have to exercise. Your clairs, you have to exercise them. You have to work with these psychic senses so that you can strengthen them, so that you can develop them, but most importantly, so you can learn to trust them. Things will become more and more clear the more work that you put into your intuition development. Just like trust with any other relationship, you have to work at it. You have to build that trust. You have to build the trust that you have for yourself, the trust that you have in your spirit team, the trust that you have in your abilities. And it's scary. I still find myself anxious and nervous when I am giving messages, when I am tapping into my intuition. It's nowhere near like it used to be because I've worked at it. I have received validation. I have realized that I'm stronger than I ever thought that I was, and that has helped me become more confident. That has helped me to trust myself more and to trust my intuition more. There have been many times where I've thought I've been wrong, where I have delivered a message and it didn't resonate with the person. But then I've also received so many things in those moments where later I'm validated. While that information didn't make sense at the time, or I wasn't able to have those messages validated in the moment, later on they came full circle. Later on, my intuition was validated. You will never reach that step if you don't push yourself, if you don't trust, if you don't try to believe in what it is that you're receiving. All of us have intuition. All of us are intuitive. All of us are psychics. All of us are mediums. All of us can do this. I've said this so many times in my other episodes. You are spirit. Yes, you are human, but you are also spirit. You are energy. So you can communicate with spirit and energy just as easily as you can communicate with me or communicate with a friend. The only difference is the language is different. You weren't born learning how to speak, learning how to form words, learning how to write, learning how to understand words and what they mean. You had to grow that. You had to develop that. You had to learn these skills. It's the same with your intuition. You have to learn these skills. You have to learn how your intuition works and how it speaks to you. And the only way to do that is to trust and to practice. So I hope that this helps you. I hope this empowers you to trust yourself. Trust the intuitive messages that are coming through, and don't feel like you have to know all of the answers. You don't have to know where it came from exactly. You don't have to know what it means. You don't have to know what you need to do next. You just have to trust. Trust that it's real. Trust that you received it. Trust that you are being shown things. You're hearing things. You're feeling things. And all of that is real because you are communicating with energy. You are communicating with spirit. Trusting that is going to really progress you on your intuitive development. So, I hope that you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining me. And if you're interested in the Chasing Spirituality community so that we can practice these gifts and skills together, definitely check that out at my website, chasingspirituality.com. Continue to send me your questions. I love to get your questions and turn them into podcast episodes. You can email me at chasingspirituality@yahoo.com, or you can fill out the contact form on my website. Make sure that you follow me on all the social medias. I post episode updates and other things like that, things that we're doing in the community, as well as, sometimes helpful and funny videos on TikTok. I'm everywhere, Chasing Spirituality, except on Instagram, it's chasing.spirituality. I hope that you all have a great day, and I look forward to hearing from you. This is for anyone who resonates with this podcast and is interested in more spiritual content. Have you checked out the Chasing Spirituality community? Well, you can find out more on my website, chasingspirituality.com. But this community is a wonderful place for you to meet like-minded people, but also be supported in your own authentic expression as you go on your spiritual journey and you learn more about fascinating topics, as well as exercise your own spiritual and intuitive gifts. We have lives every single month. There's meditation videos and courses and tons of extra bonus content and videos. So if you're interested in more content, please go check that out. We would love to have you.